So I will be drinking this cappuccino, and James will be having this Mormon hot chocolate, which he seems to think is pretty good. So I have hot water bottle in here that I'm cradling in my stomach so that well, not inside it. Anyway, it's kind of breezy, so I probably won't be able to keep these set up. But I just wanted to say this is Legion, the complete final season. And honestly, it wasn't as good as the last season that I watched before this. Just sit down. And, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I renewed it because nobody else had it on hold.
Good.
So I will be watching it again, and James will get a chance to watch it. He's been very busy.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it's definitely the series is worth watching, and it amazes me that this is the final season of Legion, yet they put out 9 seasons so far of the middle. This is not that good. Like, honestly, it's almost unwatchable. So, and it might be unwatchable for me. We'll see, because if I have anything better to watch, that's not going on, even if I'm cleaning the house, honestly. Now,
Luther's got to 5 seasons, eh?
yes,
Yeah, he's a
and
good
honestly,
actor.
it's worth watching just to watch Idris Elba with the sound off. He's quite handsome.
But he's also a good actor.
He's also a good actor.
So how often does that happen,
Yeah.
particularly in
And-
Hollywood? I don't think he comes from Hollywood originally.
So I watched this morning, and I will save it for James if nobody puts it on hold, because he enjoys them also. And it was worth
First noticed
watching,
him in The
and I
Office.
don't know what's going to happen in season 6, because one of the main people, she's got to be dead. Anyway.
Cliffhanger, eh?
Yeah. Now, I don't know which of these I would say is more worth watching. We enjoy them thoroughly.
Yep.
So,
This
with
is a real
Legion,
sleeper,
I
this
will write about Legion, because it's kind of funny. Like, I think maybe it only lasted so many seasons because, like, for me, I completely relate to this series, Legion, and it's kind of uncomfortable because it's about people with serious mental health issues, but yet it's a superpower sort of movie, right? And so I think that maybe it didn't last because people are uncomfortable with the fact that they identify with it. They don't want to be thinking that they might have mental issues or whatever, right? But don't think that way. Just enjoy the show. It's worth watching, and it's brilliantly written. Now, basically, in this season, they're battling time. Time slipping away from them. It's being gobbled up by some blue cats. And they don't really look like cats, but anyway. I don't want to give too much away, so just watch it. Just watch it. And Ms. Fisher's Modern Murder Mystery, Series 1. Wow. Now, normally, James and I, when we see Australian stuff, we're like, oh.
When we see it on the package or hear it.
Yes, we're a little bit wary of it. But in this case, perfectly executed. Besides one thing James wants to point out.
Ms. I don't think Ms. really started as a designation, alternative designation to Mrs. and Miss until maybe 1970. I don't think it was much later than 1970. It might have been a little bit before, but that's about when it hit my consciousness. So this is kind of looks to be, I don't know if she reminds you a little bit of Mrs. Emma Peel.
Well, I think she's
like
supposed to, given that her detective that she works with.
It's called Steve.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, but I was picking up on that even before then. So I think I can recall this kind of hair band around
it's
1966
fantastic.
or something like that. The music sounds more like even pre-Beatles, maybe even pre-1960. They're trying to sound periodic and stuff like that, or like period pieces. But generally, they get things right. The hairstyles they've got her rocking, and the clothes styles and stuff like that. That kind of looks like Maud, what she's wearing a little bit. That was like 65, 66 when it became quite popular in England. The look really didn't become worldwide until maybe Sgt. Pepper's or something, 66 and 67. So, you know how the Beatles are all dressed up on Sgt. Pepper's, or have you seen the album cover? They're dressed
Yes. Well, in any case, I'm totally convinced while watching this that this is in the 60s. Mind you, I was not alive in the 60s.
Yeah.
So, but for me, this was so worth watching. And I love that the Australians seem to be more into Agatha Christie sort of mysteries that I like.
Yeah.
Whereas the British now, they seem to be more into police kind of dramas, which I don't.
No.
So...
Yeah. The only way they differ from Hollywood is there are so many women, and maybe it's that way in England.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, I worked at a cop shop here. Very few women. You know, like I don't think it was even a dozen out of roughly 100 members. You know, actually practicing members. You know, out there on the street. So it might have been closer to a half dozen. And yeah, maybe things have changed in the last 20 years, but I don't think so. I think, frankly, I think they're being politically correct. You know, like. There are all sorts of women at all sorts of levels, and maybe it's that way in England. I don't know. You know, it's just I'm a little skeptical. I've got to be careful.
I lost my boxes. Yeah. Well, anyway, both of these shows are entertaining. Both, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, everybody needs a little mystery every now and then, and so both are must see. As far as I'm concerned, I'm really impressed with this, especially since it came from Australia.
Yeah, thank you, Australia.
Yes.
You're finally getting it together.
Well, no, we did like other shows.
We liked some
Australia.
Other stuff. I even liked Crocodile Dundee, I gotta say.
Did you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Well, let me put it this way. He actually, a lot better than Clint Eastwood, you know, like, it just, I didn't like it. You know that one?
Good.
You know, like, did you see? Yeah, his smile was great. That was the thing, you know. Like I think he was like a guy who sold beer, you know, beer commercial kind of guy. But he was right for that role. I wouldn't want to see him in anything else. So compare him with Clint Eastwood, you know, like Clint Eastwood when a guy's holding a hostage. This is the classic Clint Eastwood thing. There's a black guy holding a hostage, and he puts a gun to the guy's head. And the Clint Eastwood says, "Go ahead, make my day." Well, that's okay.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I have to admit that I don't like anything done by or with Clint Eastwood since The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
There you go. And that was very good.
Having said that, that was so great that, and as far as I'm concerned, as long as somebody does one thing awesome in their life, then they're awesome. So Clint Eastwood, awesome.
Yeah, well,
because
he was well cast and
because
well directed.
So I don't really care what he has done or since then. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know. It's just when I saw that movie in the early 80s, I was going, I got a horrible shiver from Risky Business too. I've gone, wow, this is different from the 70s and really the 60s. It's huge.
Yeah.
You know, I could see there were different values coursing. Dundee. It's a black guy, streets of New York, and he draws a knife on Crocodile. Now that's a knife, and he's got this smile, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Everyone loves that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I guess I'll put these away. It looks like you have a couple books to talk about. James has been up all night reading.
No.
Oh, so you didn't do this last night?
I've been waiting several days to do it because I've been busy with other stuff. But a couple of classics here, written quite a while back, so maybe 150 years ago. The German Ideology by a guy called Karl Marx and another guy called Frederick Engels. And this is the class struggles in France, 1848 to 1850, by Karl Marx. Now I'm going to preface this by giving you a short summary of a view of Karl Marx by some sort of right-wing commentator in some sort of right-wing paper. I can't remember if it was Robert Fulford or Conrad Black or some moron like that. But they were saying Karl Marx was unreadable. And I'm afraid, I don't want to say for sure, but I was afraid that what they really meant was unread.
Exactly, yeah.
Unreadable, no, unread. So actually, Karl Marx is very readable, and this is in translation. You can largely tell. These aren't necessarily the greatest translations. This is both of these things were put out by International Publishers, New York. So they were so international that the funding would have come from the Soviet Union, right? And so the translations aren't that good. They aren't as bad as some translations. Translations of Lenin, maybe they aren't that bad. No, Lenin's just the kind of guy who is constantly making cheap jokes about his opponents, and boy, everyone seems to be an opponent one way or another. He'll be talking about Plekhanov and Axelrod and Karl Kautsky, and you know, when I first was reading this stuff, I was going, who are these guys? But they actually were important, and some of them were way smarter. Karl Kautsky, way smarter, probably quite a bit nicer than Lenin. That's not saying much about Karl Kautsky. If you said that about anyone, it's not really a big commitment. But yeah, you know, this guy had formulations. He's, you know, near the end of the Communist Manifesto, it might be the last words. It's workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. Now, it's an awesome sort of thing. It's not quite true, because you can lose your life, you know. But that didn't bother guys, ideologues like Marx and Engels, and particularly ideologues like Lenin and Stalin. You could easily lose your life, and you wouldn't even be fighting against your chains imposed by capitalists. You'd be fighting against chains imposed by those chimps. But, you know, I'm looking through it, you know, like looking for style, and I'm saying, no, there's plenty of style. There's lots of use of paradox and all this sort of stuff. Inversions. Marx actually, he was a scholar. You know, you can't really say the same about Lenin and Stalin. You know, they did well in school, and that's generally, you know, unless I'm not talking about troubles they had with authorities. But, you know, they actually studied. Stalin apparently tried, and he might have to a certain extent succeeded, learning Esperanto. It's a pretty easy thing to learn.
Well, for you.
Yeah, it's easy.
Okay.
All you got to do is have a pretentious, yeah, I've taken 22 at university and 23rd on the internet, messing around with a whole lot of other languages too. Like, it's dozens. In fact, it's over 100. So, but anyway, yeah, Stalin, the fact that he might have even possibly mastered Esperanto does not scare me in the least. But yeah, you know, I'm going through it, and here's what I'm going to say about Karl Marx and Engels working with him. They managed to diagnose a particular condition, and they also, which is capitalism. Capitalism is kind of like a disease, and they also gave sort of like a prognosis that things were going to get more corporatized, and in a certain way it was prophetic, because, you know, it's not as though this disease had been analyzed terribly well by anyone else, you know, but you know, they were saying these little corporations that we see right now, and they were pretty small, you know, back 1848 and stuff like that. Even 1844, I think, was when Marx was putting out, not really putting out, but putting together his economic manuscripts. That's a long time ago. You know, we didn't have big corporations turning out jet planes. You know, big corporations turning out social interacting on the internet and stuff like that. We didn't have that kind of stuff. You know? And he predicted. He said that, you know, the corporations were going to get big. I don't think they even had the term. Their bodies were going to get bigger and bigger, bigger. Basically, that's what the root of corporation is just a body. But the big trouble is his recipe for countering that is a recipe for disaster. It's the recipe is revolution. And I think the main problem with it, I'm not the first to say this by any means, but the people who said this are, I think, to a large extent right. There are many different problems with the formulations. What he raised was not just a generation, but generations is still raising them out of hither, thither, and yon, of revolutionaries. Well, that's not the way to deal with an economic problem. It's a political solution to an economic problem. And so revolutionaries, how are they going to handle an economy? Well, they're going to be hands-on, and the hands are going to be on the neck, and increasingly tightening. And that's what happened in the Soviet Union. That's what happened in China, until China looked around and said, hey, like we've got a way bigger population than Japan, a way bigger population than Korea, South Korea, way bigger population than Taiwan. And their economies are more powerful, not per capita, but overall, than ours. They're going to swamp us. And that's when they changed. Did you know that? Yeah. They looked around. They weren't like the communists in Russia. They were so stupid. They're going, what? Where did they just walk themselves over a cliff? The communists in China were going, yeah, they actually noticed.
And then they started grabbing sand and building up their... So now China's bigger.
Their economy is slightly bigger than America.
Well, their land mass is bigger now.
Oh, yeah.
They're grabbing sand from... And so, I mean, everybody is talking about various islands or whatever disappearing, and it's like, okay,
beaches disappearing overnight.
Overnight. And it's like, okay, is it really because of global warming and the polar ice caps melting, or is it because it's turning up in China all of a sudden?
There might be some real capitalists doing it. The Chinese are fake capitalists. They've got there are no controls on it. And so it's documented. I mean, people will say you'll have some nomads in northern Africa, and they'll be saying there was a beach here last night. It's not global. We want to be careful. Global warming, if it continues, it will take away beaches slowly but surely.
Sure, it's an issue. It's a legitimate issue, but you got to look at a whole bunch of different things and say, okay, well, even though some people might have interests in blaming one thing or whatever and not blaming another thing, you have to be honest about things and go, okay, well, I have socialist values, but what China's doing, maybe, right? Even though you might want to blame big smokestacks instead.
So there's a lot of things that are taking away beaches, and it's not just the Chinese. It could be like people from Europe. They'd be my prime suspects. Holland, for example, they're not far away. You see what I'm saying? They're close.
Okay, but I think people would notice if there was beach showing up on the other side of their dams or whatever.
Well, you see, in the inside of the dams, they're below sea level.
Yeah.
And they've got polders there that I think they've still got. I don't think they've filled them all in. Maybe they have. But originally they had a big lake, kind of like inside of a dam, huge dam. And you might actually be able to see it from space if you're moored that far up. So they filled them up with things called polders. That stuff from. Hopefully they paid money for it. At any rate, one of the things that caught me was, I'm just going, when I was a kid, I was so enthused. I'd see people from Sweden, what they were doing was they were, maybe the ideal social democracy. And it still might be, but, we got to be careful about our ideas. They were talking about making cars as a group, Everyone worked, like there was none of the assembly line sort of stuff. And that assembly line sort of stuff, even before assembly lines existed, was talked about by Adam Smith, kind of like the prophet of capitalism. And this is 1776, I believe, when his book, The Wealth of Nations, was published. And it's division of labor. Like one person specializes in one thing. I think the example he uses, making a pin. Some person makes the head of the pin, another person makes the shaft of the pin, another person puts it in a package, all that sort of stuff. This is, again, before assembly line. And Adam Smith says you can produce more pins doing that sort of stuff. Here's Karl Marx, who died in 1883. This is more than 100 years after Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations. And he said, what we're going to do is we're going to change that. We're going to go back to having a person producing one object, and they won't be alienated. That's a technical term in the translation in English. It's probably entfremden. That's the German word that's ordinarily translated by alienation. Entfremdung. And I'm going, yeah, you can do that, but you won't be able to keep up unless you change the whole of the world that way, and then you'll go back to medieval times. You'll go back to medieval times. So, he was talking about his predecessors and his contemporaries as being, he calls his stuff scientific socialism, and he calls them utopian socialists. And I'm going, you stupid hypocrite. You see, like, he wants to go back. He's a utopian too. That's a utopia. Well, I'm using the German word utopia or something like that. It's a utopianism to think that you can have labor like that that'll be competitive. You can't produce one thing. I try in some of the things I do, like with my scientific research. It's not just history and stuff like that. I can get good at a variety of different things, but am I going to make an airplane? Are you going to make an airplane?
It would take maybe a whole lifetime for me to figure out how to make one airplane. I could do it if I really worked at it.
Actually put it together?
You betcha. If I really worked at it, one airplane, but I would have had to start, from when I was young.
Yeah.
I think one airplane, that's doable.
Yeah.
I mean, the Wright brothers managed it.
Yeah. So I can guarantee you, I could put a cart,
jumbo jet or anything, but
I could put a high-tech cart together. One that kind of rumbles down the road. Now understand, the medieval era, it's amazing. I'm reading a book by an Arab, Albert Harari. I suspect he was raised Christian, maybe from Lebanon, I'm just guessing. Because there are a lot of Arabs that, the majority of Lebanese, when I was a kid, were actually Christians. And he's saying, he's saying when the Arabs move someplace, they settle. People just laugh at when you're reading American history and they say the settlers settled. No, they colonized in the United States. They colonized here in Canada. And the big trouble is, I'm a person of color. It doesn't show. I'm part Indigenous American, I'm part Black American, I'm part South Asian, and that's just the beginning. And when I see, I don't care.
You're like the world nation, the world...
United Nations.
Yeah,
exactly, all in one.
All in one.
And, it's probably a good chance that I'm Muslim and stuff like that. Not Arab. But, I just don't really see color. And, so if I see someone talking about the Arabs settling in Spain and stuff like that, it's colonization, dude. Get it straight. But there's one thing he did get clear. He said, from 600 to 1800 in the Middle East, wheeled traffic basically stopped. And it was done by camels and mules. And he says, I don't understand why. Perhaps it's the fact that the Roman roads decayed. What the heck? You know how long the Roman roads lasted?
Yeah.
Like from 200 BC to maybe almost like 480 to 600 years. Roads decay. And they just don't decay,
No, it's...
they've got to be taken care of.
Really, it's... You were listening to Margaret Atwood on the radio talking about... what do you call it?
The Handmaid's Tale?
Handmaid's Tale. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and which I enjoy. James
it was a review. It was from 1985. It was a review from way back. But I guess that's when it was first published. But anyway, she was yapping about it.
Yeah, and in the TV series, they seem like they've went back in time, but it's set in present time. You don't know when, but it's...
to me, I consider it sci-fi.
Like it could be now, right?
That's the way they're doing it. It seems like sci-fi. It's definitely alternative reality.
Sure. And, but that could happen at any time, depending on who's in power, whatever, and I think people need that kind of wake up, you know, watching something like The Handmaid's Tale, which there's a lot of things in it that are totally unbelievable. The character June is not a hero. She's reckless, and she gets people killed. Good people who are doing good, and she doesn't much care. She cares more about her own family and herself. She's very selfish, and but sometimes she does manage to pull off some good. So anyway, and the fact that she's basically a concubine.
That's what a handmaid is. Yeah. That's a biblical term in King James Version, as I recall.
But she's producing children, and that's really her primary purpose. They're not portraying it as her bedroom activities as being the main thing. But like, I don't think that's believable. People would have concubines, and say for now, if a group took over that really appreciated having lots of wives and lots of concubines, then I think they would be more likely to just harvest the ovum from the concubines and never let them get pregnant. They just keep using them for what they were wanting to use them for. And then people like, say, the preferred wives, or the Marthas, which are really another kind of wife. They're the ones who cook and clean and whatever. They might be more, like, better suited to be mothers, right? Then, because whores, really? Mothers? You know. And, so...
Yeah.
Anyway, and how many men really want to be nailing a pregnant woman? A lot of men don't find that body shape physically attractive. So why not harvest the ovum? And then you have hot buddy concubine all the time for action. And then you don't even have to have sex with the wives that would make good mothers. You could just get them implanted with the ovum and your semen, and there you go, right? So that's not believable.
I think if we actually checked out what happened with concubines in many situations, and not just one particular religion, they didn't want concubines.
But in that show, in The Handmaid's Tale, the women have to go out, when they go out in public, they're accompanied. They do not go out on their own. And there's a lot of things in the show that should make people think, wait a minute, like they're Christian in the show, but it should make you wonder, right? So anyway,
the examples that were brought up in her book were Germany and Romania. So what she was talking about was sterility, which
oh, definitely. And
this was 85.
It's going to become an increasing problem. I mean, if you think about it, I'm probably run out of time. We'll probably have to talk about this at a later time. Oh yeah.